Okay, Lana Madarin, we'll plough on. We've about 150 people in there, and it's rising. It's Misha Saibo Kinshla. I'm Saibo Kinshla, the principal officer, dealing with the implementation of the Official Languages Act. You may know me from some previous information seminars. Míle fáilte, you're all very welcome here today. So we just wanted to, I suppose you got our communication before Christmas that the remaining provisions of the Official Languages Amendment Act had come into force before Christmas. So I suppose we just wanted to get everyone together just to let you know where we stand now, what that means for you, and what's kind of coming down the tracks in the coming months. So apologies, just a few housekeeping, I suppose, just at the start. We are recording the presentation, and this will be made available to you. We'll be putting it on the website, so we'll get that link out to you next week as part of our newsletter. So there will be the recording of the presentation and also the slides. We'll make them available to you on our website, and we'll let you know when they've been uploaded. So just as an aid for yourselves, I suppose, and then if there's any colleagues of yours who weren't able to attend today, that please feel free to pass those on once we share those links. If you have any questions during the seminar, you can pop them in the chat function there, and we'll do our best. You'll see there's a large number on today, so we'll do our best to get to as many as we can. If there's any that we don't get to, we can follow up with you, or don't be afraid to follow up with us on our email addresses. I'll outline a little bit further as we go through what are the appropriate queries, I suppose, towards ourselves, and what would be more appropriate towards Ifighan Commissioner Atonga. But I've shared there the contact details, and we'll come to them again as we go through. So just to note all that with you as we're going. No. So I won't go, we've done a number of information seminars around the Act at this stage, and so I won't go into too much detail in terms of the behind the scenes, going way back when. But just to note, I suppose, that as you may know, that the Irish language is the first official language of the state, and that the Official Languages Act 2003 and then 2021 have given, I suppose, a statutory basis to the provision of Irish language public services, or public services through the medium of Irish. So there are a number of mechanisms, I suppose, under the Official Languages Act. Most recently, we launched our first ever national plan for Irish language public services. So that was published in October 24, apologies, just before Christmas there. Where I'll speak a little bit more about that in a moment, but we are working on a national an action plan to accompany that national plan. So we'll do a separate more in-depth information seminar around that national plan once the action plan has been published. There are also the language standards, which are to come in place of language schemes. So many of you may already have language schemes in place for your organisation, which will remain in force until such time as we prescribe language standards for your individual or class of public bodies. So again, I'll speak a little bit more to that in a moment, but we'll cover that in greater detail when that starts to become, when we start to go out for consultation on that in earnest. And then the two other mechanisms under the Act are there are duties through regulations. So, for example, there was regulations made under Section 9.1, which covered oral announcements and signage, stationery, all of that kind of stuff. So they're the kind of things that will come to be through regulations. And the language standards themselves, in fact, once they are prescribed, they will come to be through regulations as well. And then there are a number of direct duties that come about under the Act. So, for example, there's the usual around replying to correspondence in the language, in the official language it's received. So that's kind of a well-established duty at this stage, we hope, anyways. And then we also have, more recently, I suppose, the advertising provision, which, by all intents and purposes, the latest reports overall that it's not without challenges, but overall the compliance with that has been quite good. So just to give a brief overview, I suppose, of where we are, how the Act is laid out. So just briefly, the national plan I mentioned there, that was published in October last, and it's broken out under 5 key strategic themes. And these are, I suppose, broad initiatives then looking specifically at the provision of public services through Irish. And then the technology aspect, we see huge potential and opportunities, I suppose, in technology, as a lot of our services, more of our services start to be moved online, and just making sure that the Irish language is front and centre in those developments, and that can ease a lot of the pressure on other areas, maybe face-to-face services, more historically that would have been there. The more we move online, if we make sure Irish is in there to the fore, the better will be for the provision of those services. And then the 4th one is our training, recruitment and language competence. So of course we have our 20% recruitment target by 2030 of those competent in Irish. So we'll be looking at a number of strategies and ways and measures to support the public bodies in achieving those targets. And then the final one is around data collection. The research carried out for the national plan indicated maybe we don't have a lot of data at the moment in terms of, who has Irish working in public bodies. Is that information being captured when they're entering? If they've done a course, is that information being captured? So they're all things that we'll be looking at under the national plan and under the accompanying action plan. So as I mentioned there, we're working on I've kind of covered the 5 strategic themes. We did carry out extensive research that formed the basis of the plan, and it is available on our website. And I just noted there, I suppose, just to note, we're currently in a transitional period. We will be moving under the Department of Rural and Community Development. So just to note that. So I suppose we still have our old department name there, but that transition will be happening over the coming weeks. So just to note that. So we are in work as in train on the first of these action plans for the period 25 to 27, and we hope to have that published in the coming months, and that'll go to government again before being published. And that'll set out, I suppose, the national plan is set at quite a high level. The action plans will look to set out more specific measures, I suppose, in hoping to achieve those different strategic objectives. And a lot of stuff in the action plan, obviously we'll have quite specific stuff. And there, really a lot of the next 2 to 3 years will be looking to try a lot of the different things, big, small, and public bodies to try what's working for them, what's not, and then possibly regroup then for the second national plan, or the second action plan, to see, right, really home in on what has worked well, what we could develop further. So that's kind of the general basis of how we'll be working. And then additionally, just under the Act, within 3 months of the publication of the national plan, the Minister is to set dates for Gaeltacht offices and services. Now, between everything, the consultation on that is still ongoing, and some of you on the call here may have received or may have already been in touch with our members of the unit around that consultation, if it applies to you. So the language standards I touched on briefly at the start there. So just to give a brief overview of the language standards, and I mean, we've covered this on a general basis in previous information seminars, but they are to come in place of the language schemes. So again, if you have a language scheme in place, that remains in force until we prescribe a language standard for you or your class of public bodies. The language standards will not set a lower level of service, I suppose, than what is already being provided. So if you do have a language scheme in place, or if you're already providing services through Irish, that will be the absolute minimum of the service to be provided under the language standards. And I'll detail a little bit. There is consultation around that. So none of this will happen immediately. We are hoping to go out to the first class of public bodies around this consultation towards the end of Q1 this year, so in the next couple of months, and there will be a lead-in time before the standards are implemented, and our own department are to issue guidelines. Well, it says may, but we will be issuing guidelines to public bodies around those language standards. So just to detail a little bit more around that consultation process, there will obviously be a formal notification to your public body or class of public bodies when we, I suppose, reach your cohort for the setting of language standards. There are a number of consultations that are to take place before the language standards are set. So there must be a consultation with relevant ministers. So whichever minister is over, I suppose, the parent department of your public body. There will be consultation with the relevant public bodies and public consultation as well. So under the Act, the draft standards are to be published on the department's website, and 3 months are to be given to the public to submit observations or submissions, and the same for the public bodies. They will have 3 months from the same date to engage with us and to consult with us. So there will be, we will of course keep you informed on that as we work through the different classes of public bodies. Yeah, I think I've covered most of that. So we will be in touch with you again on that. I suppose just to mention, even if we haven't reached your public body, even if you're not in the first class of public bodies, once the draft standards have been published online, I suppose it will give a good indication or idea of where we're going with them. So even if the first batch doesn't apply to your public body, it will give an idea of where we're going. And I know we've had numerous very worthwhile and helpful conversations with various public bodies coming to us saying what do we need to be doing to get ready for X, Y, and Z. So hopefully once they're published, it'll give a bit more clarity around the direction that we're going there. Even though, they may slightly differ from sector to sector, obviously, because there's different services and that to be looked at. So just taking the opportunity, another direct provision, I suppose, or direct obligation under the Act is a newish one. Well, it's nearly 2 years in force now, around Section 4A and 4B. So this stipulates that a senior official is to be appointed for the purposes of the Act in every single public body who that comes under the Official Languages Act. So this person should be at assistant principal level or higher, or equivalent. And they really are the ones who are tasked with, monitoring and reporting to the head of that public body around compliance with the Official Languages Act and progress made. And anything that's reported should be included in the annual report. Now, I know we do get a lot of questions around, what should be included in the annual report, and we will be looking to develop a template around that this year. It may not be available in time for reporting on 2024, but we would hope to have that available for reporting on 2025. But obviously, if there's anything of note yourselves to be reported on a more general basis under the Act, I suppose whoever's on the ground there in the public bodies will be more aware of what things of note might be included there for this year. We also ask that this senior official has a dedicated email address for matters around the Official Languages Act. So we suggest possibly ATO Achtanga and the Irish for the Official Languages Act at the name of the public body.ie, just for example. And one of the key reasons for this is, obviously the senior official, we understand people move around, they change grades, they change roles and all of that kind of stuff. So if the contact details we have for the senior official is just their own email address and then they change, that we may not be aware that information is not going through. So if that hasn't been done already, please set that up. And we'd ask that those details, if they haven't been done so already, be shared with ourselves and IFIGO Commissioner Tonga at the Language Commissioner's Office as well. It just helps for us to ensure that the communications that we're issuing are going through to the right people. So I suppose into the provisions that have come into force since before Christmas. So the first was Section 4 of the Amendment Act 2021, and this made a number of amendments to Section 9 of the Principal Act. So I mentioned briefly at the start Section 9.2, which would have looked at replying to correspondence received in the language it is received. So this has, and in the original act, this focused on email and written correspondence. However, obviously the world has moved on a lot since 2003. So social media is now being included in this provision. So if you receive a post, so this again is about post communications in and how you respond to that as opposed to outward. So if a post comes in on social media, it is to be responded in the official language that it is received. So if a post comes in on social media in Irish, it should be replied to in Irish, and there shouldn't be any undue, I suppose, delay in replying to that just because it's in the Irish language. Now, just to mention, there will be quite a lot of information on these slides. We will be sharing them, as I mentioned. So this is just really a brief overview of what's actually in the Act itself. So as I mentioned, as we're going through, please feel free to ask questions, or if something strikes you as you're reading through it again after, you can, of course, email that on to us. So that's 9.2 is just those social media posts. Section 9.3 then was amended. So Section 9.3 originally looked at communications outward, I suppose, from the public body. So general communications to the public or class of the public. So this has now been expanded to include communications for providing information or marketing, so that they will be made in Irish or in Irish and English. So that is to be expanded out. And then Section 9.4, which has now been inserted, it's a new section, I suppose, dictates what kind of form those bilingual communications should take. So the text in Irish shouldn't be smaller than the text in English. The text in Irish should be as prominent, visible, legible as the text in English, and that any part of the text abbreviated in Irish is, so basically the message is completely the same. There's absolute parity of esteem between the two languages in the communication. So just to mention on these ones, these came in with immediate effect. So they are live now, if you will. And if you do require any further information, really the IFICN Commissioner's the Language Commissioner's Office would be best placed to provide any guidance on them should you have any questions. So I just have included there various forms of communication to IFICN Commissioner's Taonga. So if you do have any queries around those amendments to Section 9.2.3 and insertion of 9.4, they should be directed to IFICN Commissioner Taonga. So then Section 5 of the Amendment Act 2021, this inserted a number of completely new sections into the Principal Act, and they are sections 9A to 9E. So again, there may be a lot on these slides. Some is kind of repetition of sorts, but we'll go through them. And again, you'll have a copy of the slides for after, and they're very closely just mirroring, I suppose, at this stage, what is in the Act itself. So Section 9A, you may or may not have heard a bit of talk about this. This is, I suppose, the protection long sought by people with Irish names, or particularly fathers in their names, or addresses, to have their names recorded and used correctly. So this includes name, and included in that is the patronymic and matronymic form of the name. So that would be where we are here in Connemara and Galway. Sometimes somebody's second name is their parents' name, or somebody prominent in their family. So and initially this was brought in because you might have a lot of Sean O'Flaherty's in the same vicinity, I suppose, particularly before Eircode, or even in the same house. So it was kind of a unique identifier for which particular Sean O'Flaherty you might be trying to get to there. So that really at the inception of this was the reason that was included there. Addresses, of course, and then titles, and also the option not to use a title. So these are coming straight from the Act, and then to facilitate the use of the Lend accent. So what we mentioned there, you know, the primary purpose, I suppose, of this section is to give that protection around the recording and the use, but we are aware as we move online and to more IT systems that there will be a need to ensure that ICT systems are configured to accept these, and there will be, you know, a period of settling in around that. So I suppose what we'd asked at this stage is that, you know, any new IT systems that you're looking to bring in, that you wouldn't bring in any new ones that aren't, I suppose, compliant with this. But we are aware that, you know, there are, you know, legacy systems or older systems that maybe do not have this compliance, and there may be a bit more work involved in bringing them up to date. We're not saying, you know, if somebody has updated their system in the last 2 years that you have to run out and do another update now unless one is due. All of this will be looked to be done on a planned and phased basis to ensure, you know, that no undue, I suppose, massive cost is involved. I'm sure there will be a cost, but we'd be looking to try and keep that to a minimum to work with you on that. And we will be issuing guidelines around section 9A as well. Just to mention, I'll come back to 9A in a second because 9A and 9B are a little bit connected, but 9B then is around official forms. So it will be looked, there is another step with 9A and 9B where that public bodies will be prescribed for the purpose. So while these have come into force, there's nothing, I suppose, immediate. Public bodies will need to be prescribed for the purposes of 9A and 9B. And within 9B, then there's the prescription of the public bodies, but even within that, there will be this prescription of certain official forms. So it's not necessarily a blanket thing on official forms. So there will be a consultation process around that. And what will be prescribed, we'll be looking at, you know, the content and layout. So for example, ideally, all official forms will just be completely bilingual. The person doesn't have to choose which language that they use. But, you know, I know there are cases in certain forms which are very long and that. So they're the kind of things that we want to work through. And it may be a case that we look at certain official forms that are associated with high demand public services. You know, there may be some more behind the scenes that we'll work through to get to. So there will be consultation around that. And the Act stipulates, you know, when prescribing these, that there are certain things that need to be in order, I suppose. So for bilingual forms, they look to, you know, stipulate when official forms and public bodies are being prescribed, the order in which the languages will appear, ensuring that there's text equivalence, message conformity, titles, abbreviated words. So basically that they're absolutely the same. And then there are stipulations around if the form is to be in Irish only as well, that mirrors, I suppose, the English language form. And again, you'll see this at the bottom of most of these slides, there will be guidelines to be issued on these. So the guidelines, just to note, under the Act, they are to be issued within 3 months of the commencement of these sections. So that will bring us towards the end of March. So it is intended for us to have another information seminar once we have published those guidelines. So again, this is just kind of telling you what's coming down the tracks, and we will be following up then once we have those guidelines to give you a bit more detail about what is intended with them. So I mentioned I'd come back to 9A. I think I've kind of covered it there, but 9A and 9B, there is that extra step. So while it's good to be aware of what's coming down the tracks, public bodies will be prescribed for the purposes of them. So there will be an additional consultation around that with individual public bodies around what is to come with them. And we are also, and this is mentioned in the national plan, we will be establishing a technical working group. As I mentioned there, you know, we understand there's different IT systems, there's different ways, you know, information is pulled from other systems that maybe isn't within the remit of your public body, and all of that kind of stuff. So we will be establishing a technical working group early this year to have a look, to really, I suppose, you know, drill into some of those issues, and to, I suppose, establish a best practice going forward and to learn from each other. You know, some processes might work very well, and just to facilitate that information sharing as we look to standardise this across the public sector. So Section 9C looks at logos. So this came in with immediate effect. So there's no additional step, I suppose, with this one. And this is this is a direct duty that falls on public bodies as of just before Christmas. And this looks around logos. Now, it is with immediate effect, but again, it may not absolutely affect your day-to-day business. So what this looks to do is when a new logo is being designed or an existing logo is being renewed or changed, that would be in Irish only or in Irish and English. And when we talk about logos here, we're looking at, you know, obviously there's the logo, a prominent logo of a public body itself. But we're also looking at logos of schemes, grants, all of that kind of stuff. So if your public body has a logo, when you're either designing a new one or looking to update, I suppose, an existing one, that will be in Irish or in Irish and English only, or well, it should be under the Act. And again, the Act stipulates specifically has specifically stipulations around the layout of those logos. So if it is in Irish and in English, the Irish text should come first, and there should be parity of steam between the text, and again, abbreviated words should mirror, you know, the same in both languages. And again, we will be issuing guidelines around this to flesh that out a bit more for you. So just to note, that does come in with immediate effect, but I suppose, again, the day-to-day around it, you know, it probably won't overly affect the day-to-day, but when it comes to new or updated logos, that's something that you should be drawing your attention to. The same with Section 9D. So again, this comes in with immediate effect, and this stipulates that any newly established statutory bodies will be in Irish only. So I suppose this was something that was way back when. We have, you know, the likes of Bus Éireann, and that which would have had Irish only Irish names historically, and we're looking to, I suppose, go back to that, and there's been a number of good examples of late. We have Táillte Éireann, we have Comisiún na Meán, and then we recently also had, in the last couple of years, Uisce Éireann, which has moved, you know, it rebranded, I suppose, to the Irish name, which is fantastic. So, and just to mention again, on the day-to-day basis, this probably isn't something that's going to affect you massively. It's something that would come to the fore, the majority, if not all, of newly established statutory bodies come to be through legislation. So this would be something, if you are looking, if your section is looking to establish a new statutory body, you know, when the bill is being drafted for that, or when the legislation is being drafted, that you would ensure that you have a name, your name, as Gaeilge, in Irish. And we are in talks with OPC, the drafters, and with Rannó Gnáthshtreachán, the translation unit in the Tíochain Oireachtas, the House of Oireachtas, to ensure you know, that they are Tíochain or Rannó Gnáthshtreachán are on hand to offer advice if needed on any names or you know, shortened names for public bodies. But again, we will be capturing this in our guidelines that are to issue. So again, the day-to-day, it does come in with immediate effect. The day-to-day probably doesn't overly affect, but if you are looking to establish a new public body or statutory body by mainly by regulation, I'd imagine you would need to be having the name As Gaeilge there. And then it also stipulates that the logo is to be in Irish or in Irish and English for that new statutory body. And again, there's a little bit of repetition here. That's what's in the Act as well. Just it does govern around how that logo should look and feel. So if bilingual, the Irish text should come first. The text should be equivalent, and any words abbreviated should be the same in both languages. And we will be issuing those guidelines around that as well. And finally, Section 9E, excuse me, we did an Irish language one this morning, so 9E, So this looks specifically, and this is, I suppose, a slightly newer area that we're looking at, and it's what we're finding more and more. A lot of public services are being provided by third parties on contract. So this is looking to bring some of those services that they're offering in under this under the Official Languages or Act or elements of it. So you'll see there from now on, so again, Section 9E came in with immediate effect. Those regulations made under Section 9.1 of the Principal Act, so around oral announcements, stationery headers, content and layout of signage, that'll all third-party services will be subject to those stipulations. The same around Section 9.2, so those communications to be replied to in the official language they received, and 9.3 when sharing information with the or marketing with the public or class of public bodies. So all of that Section 9.1 to 3 is to the third-party services will be subject to them. They'll also be subject when the time comes, once language standards are in place for your public body, they will be subject to whatever are in those language standards as well. So I suppose I appreciate the easiest way going forward, and what we would recommend is that it is ensured that any stipulations under the Act and in general, but particularly these, are built into your tendering and your contract process with when procuring, I suppose, third-party services to provide services on your behalf. The easiest way going forward is, ensuring that these stipulations are in those contracts or in those procurement or tendering documents. We appreciate there may be some contracts that are in place at the moment. This does have an immediate effect. However, it is recognised that there may be a settling in period required there for this to filter down. But certainly, immediately, if there's any contracts coming up for renewal, that's where we'd be looking to try and get this in. And again, I mentioned there, so this has immediate effect, and this one we don't have guidelines to issue around it. So again, like what I mentioned around the amendments to 9.1 to 9.4, they would be, if you have any queries around 9E, so the third-party services, you're best to direct them towards Ifigán Commissioner Tonga at those contact details there. And then finally, I think I've gone through this. So I said we will be issuing guidelines around 9A to 9D there, and we will hold another information seminar once we have them issued. So one or two just other things to note while we have you, I suppose. Hopefully most of you would have received our first edition of the newsletter, the Official Languages Act newsletter, which we issued in October. We're hoping to get our next one out next week, which will include the link to this, the recording here and the slides. And it's just a good way, to keep up to date. You'll see there are a couple of things coming down the tracks this year. They may not all have immediate effect for yourselves, but just to see what's progressing and where we're going. So please keep an eye out for that. And if you're not receiving it, what we generally do is they are issued to the 4Bs, as we call them, I suppose, the official senior official appointed for the purposes of the Act. If one is appointed, if one isn't appointed in a public body, obviously please do that. But in the meantime, we are issuing them to the head of the organisation. And we would be hoping that whoever is receiving that in the organisation is then spreading the word within the organisation, that's not just stopping with them, I suppose, that word is being spread across the organisation. And as I mentioned there, the second edition we're hoping to get out to you next week. And finally, again, maybe not relevant, particularly relevant to what we're discussing today in terms of the new provisions, but just to note, it's always good to give it a plug. We established last year the Irish Language Public Sector Network. So this is a new network available to anyone with Irish at all levels. So, LEFA fluent down to Folamori, learners who want to meet other colleagues who have Irish and to use their Irish in a social social setting. So I know there's been massive uptake on Irish language courses, and one of the biggest feedback we get a lot is that, people, the classroom is great, the tutors are great, all of that, but they really want that opportunity to use their language outside the classroom and just to get comfortable and familiar with it. So this is what this initiative is aimed at. They have 4 major events generally in Dublin during the year, but then they also run different regional events as well. So you can sign up if you scan the QR code there. Hopefully that's working for you. That'll bring you through to their website, or you can just go straight onto their website. And they also have a fantastic newsletter that outlines the different events, upcoming events, and all of that kind of stuff. So they're actually finalizing the major event dates at the moment for this year. So it could be good just to log on there, register for the newsletter, and you'll be kept up to date then and get those dates in your calendar if you will. And again, we'd be very grateful to spread the word to any colleagues you think that might be interested in that who haven't heard of it already. And we've had, I think the last time we checked, but it was a while, we had over 2,000 people subscribed or registered for that, which is fantastic. And we obviously hope to grow that. And, we may look to do more, take sectors and organize events maybe, for different sectors and that with that. So it's an evolving space, and we very much appreciate your own input or advice or suggestions in that regard as well. So I mentioned there, once the guidelines are issued around 9A to 9D. We will hold another information seminar for yourselves to bring you through, I suppose, in a bit more detail what's been, set out in those guidelines around 9A to 9D. So Sinna Will Wimsha, that's all from me. I'm just over a half an hour talking, so I'm sure you're sick of hearing me speaking now. But please, if you do have any questions, feel free to pop them in the chat. Anything we don't get to today, and I know sometimes there can be specific questions to organisations, we will try and follow up with you, or please don't hesitate to contact us on this email address. I did mention we are on the move at some stage in the near future to the Department of Rural and Community Development, but we're still available at this address, and I'd imagine there will be a redirection anyways once that goes on, but we'll keep you up to date if any of the contact details change. So Sinna Will Wimsha, I'll open the door. I think Maureen was who's working with me was going to have a look at the chat and see if there's any questions coming in there. Gurmila Maggie.